I want to start off by telling you about The Empire Strikes Back. I, like Jeremy, am a huge Star Wars nerd, and it wouldn't be a Joe Casabona talk without me mentioning Star Wars. So this scene is one of the most iconic scenes in the Ridge Tridge. It's the X-Wing scene, where Luke's X-Wing is sinking into the swamps of Dagobah, and he is trying to lift it out. And at one point, he says, "I can't do it. It's impossible." And Yoda delivers his now famous, one of his most iconic lines: "Do or do not, there is no try." And then and then Yoda proceeds to lift the X-Wing out of the water, much to Luke's astonishment. Because at this point, he's only been moving rocks, really. I mean, doing some flips with Yoda on his back. And so seeing this was just mind-blowing. Fast forward 30 some years. Rey is trapped on Ahch-To. She has no way to get off, except for that same X-Wing is now in the unforgiving waters of Ahch-To, which is, like, by the way, however they built this X-Wing is incredible, right? Because it just, like, survives being submerged under lots of water for a long time. So Rey tries to lift it. She can't. Again, she's only been really moving rocks at this point. And Luke, as a Force Ghost, spoiler if you haven't seen the sequel trilogy, as a Force Ghost, shows up and lifts the X-Wing out of the water so that Rey can go help her friends. Why am I talking about this? Because trying to lift an X-Wing on your first day of learning the Force is hard and discouraging. Launching the wrong type of podcast can be too. If you're only used to lifting rocks, then moving an X-Wing is going to be really hard. And so I want to tell you about a type of podcast that's easier for beginners, that can really help you get your feet wet in podcasting, which will help you be more consistent and establish your expertise. And that is starting a mini podcast. So I like the mini podcast because it's less than 20 minutes long. It's a solo show, so you're not coordinating with guests or other co-hosts. You get to showcase your own expertise. And because you're not coordinating with other people, you can more easily batch your content. So these are 4 reasons why I think you should start a mini podcast, especially if you're podcasting for the first time. Now, I'm really passionate about this. If you don't know who I am, podcasting saved my business. In 2017, with a 3-month-old daughter, I decided, full of hubris, that I would leave my full-time job and go out solo. I was a software developer in an agency that paid me pretty well, and I decided, yeah, I have a family. This is a great time to go out and start my own business. And I learned something really important, and that is side hustle money is not the same as full-time supporting a family of 3 money. Because my wife was also still on maternity leave, and it was, like, unpaid at this point. So I'm like, all right, I gotta do this. But podcasting saved me. I had a podcast about a year at that point. It was in the WordPress space, which is where I come from. I tell people I'm a recovering WordPress developer. And somebody in that space reached out to me and they said they wanted to sponsor my podcast long term. And so I landed my first 5-figure sponsor deal. It was a 6-month deal, $10,000. It got me through the rocky initial few months for me to build my business up and things like that. And I thought, wow, if this person is willing to give me money for my podcast, other people might be willing to give me money for my podcast. And so now, several years on, my show is generating a large portion of my own income. And so I want people to launch the podcast that they have in them, because hopefully it can help them with their business or their side hustle as well. So that's what I'm about. Here's the outline for the talk. We're going to talk about the mission statement. This is the important part, the most important part of your podcast. We'll talk about the software I recommend. We're not going to spend too much time on this because I assume everybody has their own favorite at this point, but we're going to talk about my favorite. We're going to talk about your call to action, also super important. We'll talk a little bit about how to promote. Jeremy covered that really well, but we'll talk a little bit about what I do, how to make money. Then we'll get to the Q&A, and then I'll be out in the table area for anybody who wants to network and connect. So first, let's talk about your mission statement. Before we get into my framework, I want to touch on something that Jeremy said at the end of his session, where he said that niche podcasts can charge more. This is absolutely true because, again, my podcast makes like 6 figures, and I'm not Joe Rogan. I'm not iHeartRadio, but I have a niche podcast and I reach a specific audience and people love that. No, not at all, Jeremy. I saw Jeremy's comment in the chat. I get like the average CPM is like 18 bucks, I think. I get around 50 bucks CPM and I'm fully booked through May. So it all comes down to your mission statement, I think. I think that's been my guiding light. So let's talk about the mission statement. I like this format. My podcast helps audience solve problem by, and then the goal of each episode. So I've got 2 podcasts. Let's focus on my mini podcast. It's called The Profitable Podcaster. My podcast helps podcasters solve the problem of growing and making money by giving them an actionable tip to do just that every episode. This mission statement helps you answer 3 questions. Who are my listeners? What problems do they have? And how can I help solve those problems? I think that framing it in a problem-solving way is really important, right? Because the 2 things that sell are painkillers and vitamins. Maybe you've heard this, right? People are either going to buy painkillers, something to help alleviate their pain, or they're going to buy vitamins, something to help enrich them. Entertainment podcasts, for the most part, are vitamins, and they generally take a lot more capital to produce and grow, right? I'm thinking of, I just listened to one called Stealing Superman. Super interesting investigative reporting about how Nicolas Cage's Action Comics 1 was stolen. And really interesting, but for most of us, a painkiller is going to be the thing that helps us grow. And so when you think about your mini podcast, think about who you're serving, and how you help them. So that's your mission statement. I'll freeze on this again for a minute, right? My podcast helps audience solve problem by, and then the goal of each episode. If you have a mission statement for your podcast already, or you're thinking about one, drop one in the chat. Let me see. I'd love to know who your podcast serves and what problems you solve. Once you have your mission statement, again, this is your guiding light for everything. So this is going to help you create the content for your podcast. Again, we're shooting for 20 minutes or less. This is a mini podcast. It's going to be you talking. And so I recommend that you pick a mini podcast around your area of expertise, right? This is, if you want, again, I help people create profitable podcasts. And so if you are going to build a mini podcast where you're trying to help people, you're probably helping them solve a problem you know how to solve. And so when you get to creating your content, it helps to do outlines. I see some mission statements coming in here. This is great. Let's see. Educate, de-escalate, and elevate. Helps women 40 plus design, create, and live a fabulous next chapter. I love that. Helps activists be effective by sharing protesting best practices from around the world. I love this. These are awesome. Thanks everybody for sharing. So when I create episodes for my mini podcast, I'm going to recommend that you create an outline. Here's one from an episode I did a while back called Why You Should Use Descript for Your Mini Podcast. Spoiler alert for the editing part. And this outline is pretty tight. It's got 4 points. It's got a couple of sub points. The reason I'm telling you that it should be in your area of expertise is because once you have your outline, you can likely start to record. I know that there's probably a debate that goes on between should I script my show or should I not script my show? If you're creating a mini podcast, if you're trying to lower that barrier of entry, which I think is a big benefit of mini podcasting, a script does increase production time. So if you're picking a topic you know well, create an outline, you have your talking points, you can riff a little. And so I took this and I turned this into a 15-minute or so episode on why you should use Descript. Now, I know some people are going to say, hey, I really feel like I need to script. So to script, not Descript. So here's a pros and cons list, right? Pros. Some people are more comfortable writing, right? I'm very comfortable talking. People know that from like the very first second they meet me. Like, oh, Joe probably talks a lot. Joe probably did drama club since like second grade. That's accurate. So some people are more comfortable writing. And if that's the best way for you to get your words out, to get your episodes done, great. Then script. It'll also make sure that you say everything you need to say. Right? So here's a mini podcast I did that I scripted. It was called WordPress Review. It was a news-based opinion show. Super hot thing in the WordPress space, those opinion shows. That's actually true because most of us are like programmers and we have strong opinions about everything. But I was usually starting off with a story. I was taking a piece of news and then I was making a pretty opinionated argument. And I wanted, because I knew I would get pushback from people who were listening, I wanted to make sure my argument was rock solid. And so I scripted that because I wanted to get it right. And because I scripted it, it was easier for me to repurpose as a blog post as well. So those are the pros. Some people are more comfortable writing, and you definitely got to do what you're most comfortable with. It'll help you make sure you hit all your points exactly as you want to hit them. You'll probably use fewer filler words, and then it's easier to repurpose. The cons, it does add to production time. It takes me a lot longer to write than to speak. I've taught in the classroom. I was in drama club for a very long time. And so that's where my comfort zone is. I organize my thoughts and I can speak them better than writing. I do write pretty quickly, but again, that could add to production time. Because of your mission statement, you probably, if this is in your area of expertise, you probably don't need to script. Again, unless you're really uncomfortable speaking off the cuff, and that's fine. I think that comes with experience, being more comfortable. But you could also fall to perfectionism, right? If you don't love the script you wrote, I feel like maybe you are less likely to want to publish that episode. Where for me, if I am talking for 15 minutes and I get it and it's like not super like hot garbage, I'm like, great, you know what? I've recorded it. I'm going to edit it a little bit. Let's put it out there. So those are the pros and cons. Again, do what you're most comfortable with. Because that's the most, if you're going to stay consistent, then you need to enjoy what you're doing. Again, like Jeremy said in his last talk. I will say though, part of the reason you're having a mini podcast is because you want this process to be as streamlined and as easy as possible. Again, I'm going to say as easy as possible or easier as like relative words. Podcasting's not easy. It's work no matter what. You're creating content. So, but avoid having guests and episodes that require a lot of research for you. If you're picking an area of expertise, your area of expertise, you likely don't need to do that. At least in the beginning. Mess with the format later, experiment. I love experimenting. I tell people to experiment all the time. But when you're starting out and you're trying to get a feel for this, pick a few things you know a lot about, create the outlines, and record. Speaking of, I use Descript to record. I know that Alitu is a really good candidate for this as well because now they generate transcripts. But I like Descript because it supports video. It allows you to publish to multiple different hosts, no matter like who you host with. Not no matter, but there are a lot of different hosts there. And so I think Descript is a great free. There is a free tier. It'll generate transcripts for a price, and then it's got a few killer features. So it's also cross-platform. So I'll use it in conjunction with my VA as well. But the killer features here: edit audio by deleting text, like editing a Word document. That's the killer feature for me. I started podcasting 10 years ago, not to be all back in my day, but I started podcasting like 10 years ago, and so like I used Audacity and it was great, but I hated editing. And so Descript makes it a lot easier. One click remove filler words. Now I'll tell you, I don't think you should remove every filler word. I think it kind of sounds unnatural if you're going to remove every filler word. What I like is it removes repeat words. So if I say twice in a row, Descript will detect that and it'll remove those. You can also like do a search and replace on the words you want to remove. So like if I have a guest or if I have a recording with salty language, I try to keep that explicit rating off of my podcast. I will remove the salty language. I only curse off the mic, not on the mic. And then there's studio sound. This is the killer feature for me. If you don't have a good microphone or it's a particularly noisy environment, studio sound takes bad audio and cleans it up. I have seen this in action and it is pure magic to me. So if you're, actually somebody was asking me in the messages, right, if they have like a field recorder and they're doing interviews in the field, does that matter? I think studio sound can help clean that up. Just be wary that it will make good audio sound worse. So if you have a decent mic and a good environment, don't just apply studio sound to everything. Okay, so we're going through this pretty quickly. This is great. But we have our mission statement. We have coming up with content, or how to put together our content script versus outline. I've mentioned Descript because I like Descript because I record, edit, and then publish all in that app, which means I'm not using a bunch of tools. I'm not switching contexts. I'm doing everything. Actually, right before Jeremy's talk, I should say, I published a mini podcast episode because I took my content, I recorded it in Descript. I have a little template with my bumpers and my intro and my music, and I pushed it to my audio host. And then I took the same like outline, added it to the description, and I published it. And it took me like 30 minutes, right? The content was 14 minutes, didn't have to do too much editing, pushed it out. It was great. So because that process doesn't take too long, and this is, again, the beauty of a mini podcast, you can batch your content pretty well. So if you're unfamiliar with content batching, it's working. It's setting aside a number of hours to only focus on your podcast. And I think this is really important because context switching kills productivity. If you are jumping around, if your brain is working on one thing and then you have to switch gears and think about something else, it's going to take some time to move over to that. Right? So this is why maybe you've seen, I wish I had that comic on this slide now, but there's this comic where this stick figure is like really in the zone and doing this really complex mathematical equation at a chalkboard. And then like somebody knocks on the door and asks him a benign question and then leaves, like, hey, did you get that email I sent you? And then leaves. And then like it goes back and he's just like completely lost his train of thought. And I really felt, when I worked in an office, I really felt that. So batching lets you reduce context switching. So batching your content, if you haven't launched yet, or if you're at the beginning of your launch, this is the best time to get ahead as well. Outline 10 to 12 episodes. If this is an area of your expertise, you probably have 10 to 12 ideas in your head. Block an hour or two to record. If it's going to be less than 15 minutes, you could probably do 4 episodes in an hour. If they're going to be like 20 minutes each, you probably need 2 hours to record and then clean up in your editing app of choice. But I think block some time off to record and clean up, and then schedule 4 in advance. So have 10 to 12 in the tank, schedule the first 4, and then you could always adjust based on feedback and repeat. This gives you a 3-month, if you're doing a weekly podcast, this gives you a 3-month cycle to work with. And this is great because, first of all, if you have 12 episodes in the tank, congratulations, you've already beat most podcasts, right? Because most podcasts don't make it past 7 or 8 episodes. So you're already ahead of the game. You're also alleviating the pressure of, oh no, I don't have an episode for this week. What am I going to talk about? So batching your content is going to help you greatly. Okay, so you have your you have your mission statement, you have your content, you know who you serve, you know what you're talking about. Now it's time for your call to action. I keep saying I think this is the most important. But a good call to action is important because it needs to be clear, and it needs to be a clear action you want your listeners to take. Because I like to say that we only have half of our listeners' attention because they're probably driving or doing chores. I listen while mowing the lawn. If I'm feeling especially adventurous, I will listen while cooking dinner for my 3 children who are 6, 2.5, and 1. And that's like a disaster, right? My wife is a nurse, so she gets home after dinner. So it's me and 3 kids at dinner, and I'm listening to a podcast. I'm only catching like a quarter of what they're saying. So if they want me to take action, they are going to have to make their call to action super clear, and it's going to have to be easy. I think those are the things that make a good call to action. So let's look at some good calls to action. Good, singular, clear, easy to complete. One of these bullet points only, right? Join my mailing list at link. Or check out the show notes in the app where you're listening right now or at link. Or write in and ask questions at email or at link/feedback, right? Write in and ask questions. I want feedback, let me know. Or share this with a friend. The URL is this, or use the share button in your app. One of those, if that's the main action you want your listeners to take. Bad calls to action. Let me know if you've heard and or have done this before. Hey, don't forget to rate us and review us on iTunes and subscribe wherever your podcast, in whatever podcast player you use. Be sure to check out The Thing. The link is in the show notes. Make sure to join our mailing list and share with a friend. And also, check out that other thing that guy mentioned earlier. Probably that's like most podcast calls to action. Mine, guilty, right? Coco says guilty. Nate says guilty. Joe Casabona also guilty. There's just so many things we want our listeners to do. We're really excited, right? I've got sponsors. So what am I supposed to say? Oh, join my mailing list. I'll tell you about the sponsors later. No, the sponsors paid to be mentioned on the show. Luckily, we can have it all almost. My favorite is join my mailing list. Specifically, your call to action, join my mailing list, put it at the very beginning. Make it the first thing your listeners hear. I do it this way. Real quick before we get started, I just wanted to tell you about a free resource I have over at Link. You're listening to this show because you want to be a profitable podcaster. This thing will help you out. Head over here, sign up. It's free. It'll land in your inbox today. That's it. 30 seconds, join my mailing list, get this free resource. At the end, I reiterate that, hey, don't forget about that free resource. And then I mentioned a couple of other things too, right? Oh, by the way, if you like this, tell a friend about it. Or in my main show, what I'm doing for my main show, I'm pretty excited about this. My main show is called How I Built It. It came out in July 2016. That's the one that generates most of my income for me. Um, what I've been doing for that one is instead of selling pre-roll ads now, all 3 ads are in the middle. I think I heard this on Sounds Profitable. They mentioned like data shows that like most people like 1 ad break. And so the pre-roll is only for my call to action. And then the ads are in all together in the middle. But for that one, I usually do, hey, you can sign up for my newsletter and get these delivered right to your mailbox at, and then I'll give the show notes link. So it'll be like howibuilt.it/300. And then at the end, I'll say, don't forget for all the show notes to join my mailing list and to check out our sponsors, you can go to howibuilt.it/300. I just saw somebody in the chat say, can we have it all go to one link? Yes. If you make your call to action, everything I talked about and the newsletter sign up will be over at this one link. That one easy to speak, easy to type link is the key, because show notes are probably going to be in the podcast player. But if someone's driving and they want that research or that resource, or they want something you mentioned, they're going to have to go find it later. So that's the important part, right? And beginning and end. I think a lot of people think their call to action needs to be at the end. You've lost a lot of listeners at the end. Everybody's at the beginning. Everybody starts at the beginning, probably. Okay, so that's your call to action. Let's see. I'm seeing some really good comments here. Thank you so much for all the great discussion. Let's talk about promotion really quick. Here's where you should promote your podcast. First of all, actually, let me know in the chat if you are like me from 2 years ago, where I assumed if somebody was listening to my podcast, they were probably already on my newsletter, or vice versa. Well, if someone subscribed to my newsletter, they're really into what I'm doing, so they're probably subscribed to my podcast and my blog anyway. They are not. They probably don't care. They get you in one place, they'll probably hear about your stuff there. So never assume. Nancy in the chat, never assume. Love that. Coco, I don't even have a newsletter. Definitely talk to me afterwards. I'll make a recommendation for you if you're interested. So when you're promoting your podcast, don't assume that the people on your other platforms even know you have a podcast. So here's what I like to do. First of all, promote it in your newsletter. If you don't have a newsletter, most platforms now have a free for like up to 1,000 subscribers. Your social media, whatever social media you use now. I'm big into LinkedIn. I saw some chatter about Mastodon earlier. Mastodon and Discord both like scare and confuse me. Whereas I'm like an elder millennial, so LinkedIn is like right where I am at. And then repurpose that content. So let me show you my little cycle of content and promotion. I start with a LinkedIn post. Actually, this week's Profitable Podcaster episode is about this exact process. I start with a LinkedIn post because they are easiest to write. So I will write a LinkedIn post in a Word doc. And I'll take that, I'll post it to LinkedIn, or my VA will turn it into a carousel and post it on LinkedIn. That will serve as the outline for the podcast episode. So I'll look at that. I'll maybe make some notes. Oh, add some more context here. Be sure to mention this automation there. Then I take that outline, I turn it into a podcast episode. So now the LinkedIn/Instagram post becomes a podcast episode. I know you can't see me pointing at my screen, but rest assured I'm pointing at the right words. Then I take that podcast episode and the text from the LinkedIn post, and I turn it into a newsletter. So the newsletter will have the intro, and then it'll have a box that says, hey, want to listen to this instead? Click here to listen to what I talk about in this newsletter. And so now a single document has become a LinkedIn post, an Instagram post, a podcast episode, a newsletter, and I have a WordPress plugin that takes all of the episodes from my podcast feed and turns them into blog posts. And if I want to add more context, I've been putting a lot more context in the description, but if I want to add more, I can do it there. And so that cycle is a repurposing slash promotion, right? Because then I can go back to the LinkedIn post and be like, by the way, I have a podcast episode on this, and pin it in the comments. So don't be afraid to repurpose. Don't be afraid uh, to take content you've already talked about in one place and talk about it in another place. Nancy is asking, what's the WordPress plugin that turns episodes into posts? I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but it's from Second Line Themes. So if you go to secondlinethemes.com, they should have a link to the plugin there. So that's what I do. I saw a comment like, I don't really want to write a newsletter. That's totally fine. Repurposing your content, right? I use ConvertKit for my newsletter. You can connect an RSS feed, right? So you can connect your podcast RSS feed, and you could just have that straight up sent to your newsletter subscribers. So I don't want to make more work for you. Quite the opposite. I want to make the least amount of work for you to launch your podcast as possible. So we've talked about everything except for making money up in this point, and I can do a whole talk on this. I generally do a whole talk on this, but I have some other resources. All the resources I talked about, the slides for this talk, they'll be over at podcastliftoff.com/mini, by the way. So making money. Let's go through this really quickly. I have what I call the SMASH framework. I think there are 5 ways to make money with your podcast. And spoiler alert, your mission statement is going to be really important. Sponsorships, people give you money to mention them on air. Memberships, listeners give you money for bonus or behind the scenes content. Affiliates, that's when you make money when people purchase something from one of your links, you get a commission. Selling, you sell a product or a service. And helping, you are a coach, course creator, or consultant, and you are helping people through your digital products or from direct one-on-one help. The way you make money will depend on your mission statement. So if you're like a bicycle shop and you have a bicycle podcast, you're probably making money by selling products through your podcast. Maybe you have a bicycle repair kit. Do it yourself at home. I'm bad at fixing things, so maybe this was a bad example for me, right? Or you have you teach people how to bake at home, right? And so you have an online course for baking. So maybe your podcast is some of your course content, and then you use that to sell your course, to get people into your course. It really depends on your mission statement. With a mini podcast, I think selling and helping are the way most mini podcasters are going to make money. I'll tell you, my mini podcast, The Profitable Podcaster, I had a sponsor on day one. I have a network. I said, look, I think that this could really help reach your target audience. Do you want to sponsor the first season? And they're like, yeah, sure. And then I realized, hey, I'm using this to establish my own expertise and to sell my own course, sell my own coaching. I don't want to send the mixed message to my listeners of selling both of these things. You can do that depending on your mission. But I decided that The Profitable Podcaster was for me and my expertise only. And so I decided we weren't going to renew the sponsorship. And now I'm using that to build my mailing list, to get people onto my mailing list so I can sell them on my podcasting products or coaching. So again, this is going to really depend. But I think if you're doing a mini podcast on your expertise, this is where you want to be. You want to, as a matter of fact, I want to tell you a story about my friend Sam Munoz really quick. She had a podcast that was so closely aligned with her masterclass cohort. She opened the doors to her cohort twice a year. And she had dynamic content on her pre-roll. When the doors were closed, it was a different call. It was like, get on my mailing list. But when the doors were open, it was, hey, the doors for my cohort or my masterclass are open. Go register now. And she said that converted directly. People would listen to her podcast, find out the doors were open, and go pay her money. So if your mission is so closely aligned with your professional offering, it's possible that you could make money directly from your show. I've seen it happen too. I've had people listen to either me on someone else's show or listen to my show and then reach out because they want coaching. So it's possible. You just got to make sure your mission statement is aligned with your audience, you're solving the problems, and you have that clear call to action. So there we go. We tied it all together. We did it. You are ready to lift the X-Wing out of the unforgiving swamps of Dagobah. All right. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks so much for the vibrant chat. They drop an emoji in the chat for you. Clap hands for you guys. Thanks so much. I am at Jay Casabona on most social networks. And again, you can get those free resources at podcastliftoff.com/mini. Now let's answer some questions.
We've got a question from Julia Washington, and it is, what are your thoughts on incorporating mini episodes into an already established podcast?
I love this idea. I started doing this with How I Built It, and it's with my main show, which is an interview show. And it's a great way to, again, help your listeners learn more about you, right? Because interview shows can be very guest-centric, but my podcast is my biggest platform. And so I want my listeners to learn a little about me and what I'm doing too. And so I think this is great. You can pre-record 4 or 5 of those. I like to space mine out every 4 or 5 interviews, talk about a topic that is maybe related to the last set of interviews or just related to something in my mission. For How I Built It, it's the tagline is free coaching calls from successful creators. And so I'll usually talk about something I'm working on in my business, very build in public. Here's what I'm experimenting with. But I think that's a great idea. It helps you stay consistent, and it helps kind of reduce the stress of constantly trying to create these hour-long episodes or do more interviews.
Amazing. Thank you, Joe. We've got one more question that I think we've got about 3 minutes. Maybe we'll get to 2 more. When we plan for a mini podcast, should we do an intro and outro?
Great question. I think an intro, definitely. I have, a 30 or 60 second, here's what this show is, right? Because if I'm getting new listeners, I want them to know what they'll get from this show. And so I think an intro is really important. I have the bed music. It fades out as I start talking. The outro is just my sign off. So I always say thanks so much for listening. I can't wait to see what you make. And that's how it ends. But yeah, I mean, if the intro and outro stretch it to 21 minutes, that's okay. The most important part is that you shouldn't have to feel like you need a 40-minute podcast, right? You should be comfortable talking for 10 minutes as long as you deliver value and as long as you get your message across.
Amazing. And that really segues well into this question. What qualifies as a mini episode, and how do you nail it in terms of time?
Yeah, great question. So I would say 20 minutes or less is a mini podcast episode. And I think the best way to keep it tight, because I ramble, I can ramble, I talk a lot, is making a 5-point outline, right? 5 bullet points you want to hit, maybe 3 bullet points you want to hit, and then talk a little bit about those, right? I try to keep it pretty matter of fact. And since I'm in the recorder and I'm not reading a script, I can kind of see how long I'm going. But I guess it's teach one thing, right? Troy Dean says, how do I get my students from 0 to win? How can you get your listener of this one episode from 0 to win? What should they take away? What's the one thing they should take away at the end of this episode?
Such great advice there, Joe. Thank you. Maybe we'll do, you're flying through these. So we'll just keep going. We'll just keep clicking on. Do mini podcasts statistically have more engagement than long form podcast episodes? Is this something that you have some insight on, Joe?
That I'm not entirely too sure about. I'll say for if we're on my feed, right, where I've got mostly 40 to 60-minute episodes, and then those mini episodes every couple of weeks. I'm trying to do more of those more often. I haven't seen a reduction, like a great reduction in downloads, but I don't really have that data in front of me. I'll say, like, if you do go too long, right? Like, I do see for longer episodes, if something's like over an hour, I've noticed my downloads are a little low, right? Like, some people don't want to commit to like a really long time. I'm of the opinion that even if it's like 2 hours long, if it's a podcast I like, I'll just break it up. But I guess the short answer is I don't have the data there. I suspect there are other outlets that are like Edison researchers, probably more well suited for that sort of data.